Charlie, how are you?
Mayor? Are you okay? We did some at the end. Did I get?
Okay, well, I'm glad everybody is so happy to see each other. That's great. But it is the time to start our Committee of the Whole meeting. So I'm officially calling the Kalamazoo City Commission Committee of the Whole meeting to order for Monday, March 4th. Clerk Borling, please call the roll.
Commissioner Cooney. Present. Commissioner Decker. Commissioner Hoffman.
Present.
Commissioner Pradel.
Present.
Commissioner Wilson.
Present.
Vice Mayor Hess.
Present.
Mayor Anderson.
Here. May I please have a motion to excuse Commissioner Decker?
So moved. Support.
Motion made by Vice Mayor Hess, supported by Commissioner Hoffman. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? All right, thank you so much. And thank you, Clerk Borling. Next, communications. Manager Isma.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Thank you, Manager Isma. Just a reminder here, there is now an opportunity coming up for public comments. For our Committee of the Whole meeting, the public comments are limited to 2 minutes. You can speak on any topic you're interested in presenting to the Commission on. And we will be having a public comment period at our regular business meeting that starts at 7. Yes, go ahead.
I'm Toby Hannah Davies, city resident. I just got to see inside Jamari Bogan's amazingly wonderful new Frank and Pincher Street development with the 12 new 2-bedroom and studio apartments. I love it. I'm very happy about the child care program right there for families. But it's 60% of area median income and 80% of area median income. So my question to you today is, what can we do to incentivize or make it possible for landlords to rent to people who are at 50% of the area median income, 40%, and 20%, which I believe is the level if you're on SSI. Mayor Anderson knows this inside out, if I'm not right. I'm really pleased about the LISC effort that you've approved for money for landlords so that they will get the money to renovate and meet the inspections for people with vouchers. But I think we all know many people qualify for vouchers but don't get vouchers because there are just not enough vouchers available. So my question to you is, how can we make it possible for people to rent and have a decent, stable place to live who are at 40, 30, 20% of area median income? Just today, I heard of a young man with 3 elementary-age kids doing a great job as a parent, got accepted as manager at McDonald's where he was working until they saw he had a felony on his record. And there are so many people in our community like that because we have mass incarceration. And it's really hurting people in poverty way more than anyone else. So please.
Thank you. Next, please.
Hello, my name is Kay. I want to say thank you to Cooney and Hoffman for seeing and believing community concerns and being bold to go against the status quo. I commend you. And I encourage the rest of you to email Tristan from We the People back so that we can open up the lines of communications so that you can better support community efforts. I just want to say that no matter what information is presented today and about the housing efforts, the Arcadia Creek Festival site renovation continues to be an act of gentrification. City Assistant Manager Rebecca Kick said that the efforts have been underway since 2021. That is when residents downtown and interested parties gathered to try to empower KDPS to sweep Arcata despite COVID restrictions. Since 2021, people who used to find refuge at Arcata's site are now in worse conditions than before, especially since they are consistently being displaced by KDPS at odd hours of the morning, like 1 a.m. A gentrification study needs to be done because this is a heartless and disconnected city from community realities. Anderson, you called people experiencing homelessness the phenomena of camping, yet you are heavily invested in housing, just exacerbating the housing situation. The LA statistics are 67% of Black households, 50% of Latinx households are living on a bare bones budget compared to 34% of white households. So you know your 90 million plus efforts to address the homelessness crisis is just going to white people. And yet you consistently diminish the life and death situations that people experience as a happenstance argument. People are about to be homeless as we speak. Kids are hungry now. Families are living outside now. Please actively defend and advocate for that instead of gentrification. There are over 1,500 houseless students in KPS schools. Only 560 are identified. That's only 33%. This job is left to the houseless liaison, Robert Gray Mountain, and 30 people who already have full-time jobs. The system is broken. The committee has spoken about the waiting time when resources are needed immediately because of the dire situations now. And Robin Grayman has come before you with this information. There's no sense of urgency to help people in dire need and to facilitate resources so that people can thrive. The resources are often run and dispersed by people who are not challenged their own internal bias, so many times navigating resources is traumatic in itself.
That does not actually prevent or protect people from housing discrimination, income housing discrimination, one of the biggest problems in the city.
Thank you. Next, please.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Tristan Jessup. I wanted to start by saying that although I am disappointed in many ways, angered by this Commission's decision to move forward with the original plans to use the ARPA funding, we are not going to let it stop our efforts to bring these issues to light. The working class and impoverished people of Kalamazoo will continue to organize around every opportunity we can to demand housing justice, equity, and affordability for all. It is high time that our elected officials prioritize the needs of the people over the accumulation of private property. Secondly, I would personally like to thank Commissioners Hoffman and Cooney for standing with the dozens of people who voiced their concerns here 2 weeks ago with regard to the funding plan and the ongoing indignities faced by our community members. We will not forget the bravery you showed in opposing the misuse of public funds and your prioritizing the needs of those most impacted by the housing crisis and pandemic. This city needs leaders who fearlessly defend genuine progressive policy measures, even those that may or may not be popular to the capitalists running the city from behind closed doors. As for the future, I know that myself and many others I am connected to plan to hold the members of this commission to their word on a number of statements made at the previous meeting. Namely, we expect that any housing development on this property will be built explicitly with the purpose of providing affordable housing to current residents of the city. Additionally, that the site itself will not be roped off or inaccessible to anyone, including the homeless community that often congregates in the area. Lastly, I want to emphasize for everyone here that regardless of the welfare provided by our city and state, it will always only be a band-aid on an open wound. The true cause of the housing crisis is systemic in nature. It is the direct result of the decades-long dominating housing narrative in this state, the narrative that centers and prioritizes the impact of every housing decision on the wealth of landlords and property developers, with little or no consideration for the impact on the working and poor who are forced to simply cope and endure. To that end, I have reached out to you all personally to try to schedule meetings to discuss the statewide campaign to lift the ban on rent control and how our state representatives have told us directly that they want city commissioners to be passing resolutions in favor of House Bill 4947 and to begin building a model for rent regulation at the local level. I ask that you please respond to those emails right away so we can begin the conversation of addressing the root causes of this housing crisis rather than just the symptoms. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next, please. Is there anyone else in the chambers who would like to provide a comment for this committee of the whole meeting? Thank you so much to those of you that took the time, made the effort to come and provide some thoughts here for the City Commission. Next, we are to the work of the committee of the whole meeting. Manager Ritzma.
Well, thank you, Mayor. This evening, our topic for our work session is on Housing Development Fund programs, and I have Sherilyn Parsons here, our Housing Development Supervisor, that's going to walk you through a presentation. Sherilyn?
Welcome. Welcome, Sherilyn.
Thank you for having me again up here. So let me put my eyeballs on here. So within the housing strategy, we are working across the housing ecosystem. So I just put this up here anytime I come as a reminder that we are working to partner and and coordinate with any person or agency that fall within any color on this spectrum. So we work to build, strengthen, and individuals, families, industry, community, the City of Kalamazoo markets, and economy. So we are looking across all spectrum. So the objectives of tonight's presentation are to talk once again about the Community Planning and Economic Development Toolbox we had talked about in a previous meeting, to talk about how we prepare for development and how we actively provide opportunities for development, as well as to talk about housing happening. So what has happened in the past and what is projected to happen going forward. So once again, this is familiar to probably most of you. The tools in the toolbox fall within one of three categories. So what we do is we work to decrease barriers. This comes in the way of policy and ordinances. So you remember last year we passed emergency housing ordinance. That's one of the ways that we work to decrease barriers. So we do policy, ordinance, and also zoning. So we have been under a zoning overhaul, and that is really to create by right zoning and development opportunities. So there's not additional variances or hoops or hurdles that need to happen in order to get the housing that we need done. We also work on providing economic resources when they're made available. So the city does receive entitlement dollars, HUD, Housing and Urban Development Entitlement dollars. We have consistently CDBG and home funds. We've also had CDBG CV funds that are drawing to an end, and also home ARP dollars, which we'll talk about those. We also utilize FFE funds, and in the past couple years, ARPA dollars. And then Brownfield TIF is an economic resource that we also often use with development projects. The third compartment we work in is incentives and supports. So this is where we start to layer different incentives so that we see what we need and what we want happen in the city. So we partner often with state with low-income housing tax credits. This is the major way to do a deep dive with affordability. To do the deep dive in affordability, you need the dollars that either the federal government can provide or state government can provide. So with tax credit projects, there is a lot of outside resources that are coming in to make the developments happen. We will incentivize with Brownfield TIF, tax incremental financing, and recommendation to EGLE, so that the land preparation can all be done in a way that doesn't increase the cost to the development. And then we also work with like reduced land sales or property disposition. So our three main categories or compartments within our toolbox are decreasing barriers, utilizing economic resources, and incentives and supports. And this is all for the goal of increasing housing opportunities across all income levels in all neighborhoods. So behind the scenes, one of the things that CPED has done is, through the state, we have garnered the certificate that we are a redevelopment ready community. So what that means is that we are community or customer centric, and that we have created process and procedures that assist in the creation of development and listen if there's any barriers to try to reduce those or eliminate them if possible. We also are always talking with different consortiums and within different consortiums and with statewide groups and with local developers to hear about current challenges or anticipated challenges, and also opportunities that are coming down. Oftentimes with funding, you want to get sort of ahead of what's coming so that you're prepared for the development. You remember in one of the meetings we talked about the construction schedule, and that there's a pre-development or concept, and then usually around 36 months later, there's dirt being moved. And so we want to be talking about what's sort of coming, what opportunities are coming back at the earliest part of a development so that funding can help to reach it when it gets there. Also, policy planning and zoning. So one of the things the city of Kalamazoo has been ahead of the curve on is the rezoning, so that our lot sizes are corrected so we can get the units that we need. Also, the by right zoning, so that residential development can happen in the unit amounts that we need it to happen. And then we work to create a predictability for the development community. So that's through our policy and procedures, but also in things like our pre-permitted or pre-approved plans that are coming very, very shortly. And that eliminates costs through not having to buy the architectural plans, but also save the time to go through all of the steps so that they can be sort of a plug and play into the neighborhoods. So with the commitment of a redevelopment-ready community, CPED really looks a lot at what the community has said through the Imagine Kalamazoo Master Plan. Also, we dive into the neighborhood plans. So when there is development that is asking to happen, with any of the asks or the conversations, there has to show alignment with both Imagine Kalamazoo Master Plan and the neighborhood plan, that the neighborhood has already spoken, that they desire this type of development and want it to come to pass. Then with any federal or state or even local dollars, there has to show the supported, development has to show a supported need. And that happens through a target market analysis. So the most current one that we have is from the county. You guys are familiar with the Kalamazoo County Housing Strategy that came out in 2022. Well, the city's target market analysis is in draft form that we have right now, and we hope to have that finalized in the next couple of weeks. And so that will be forthcoming, and that will be the target market analysis that is strictly and consistent for the city of Kalamazoo. So one thing we did that you'll see in that target market analysis that's coming forward is we wanted to mirror the language that people were already familiar with from the county's market strategy. And what the county had did is they broke up their geographical areas by rural, suburban, general urban, urban center, urban core. And so for the city, we are the urban core, the urban center, and the general urban. So in our forthcoming target market analysis, you will see that our numbers and the strategy co-align with what the county has put out to really target the need and the income percentages per the core, the center, and the general urban. Okay. Got to get my notes for this because there's going to be some numbers coming forward on these. So taking a quick look back here. These are developments that have happened before my time with the city, but it's been about 6 or 7 years, so they're still recent developments. I put 3 developments on this screen just to talk about them. I want to talk about the unit mix, who's occupying them, and then also give an idea of the type of tools that the city used to actually assist in the creation of these developments. So the city, we don't do the development ourselves, but we partner with those who do. So the first one is 400 Rows. 400 Rows is through phase 1 and phase 2 is a 236 unit development. 14 of those units were reserved for 14 of those units were reserved for low income. And I'm going to use the terms low income, which is 80% and below, very low income, which is 60% and below, and extremely low income, which is 30% and below. So once again, I'll do that up now. Extremely low, 30% and below, very low, 60% and below, and low, 80% and below. So when you hear those words, that's what they are talking about. So in order to get 400 Rows in play, there was brownfield involved, brownfield TIF. There was a partnership with Michigan Economic Development Corporation, MEDC. There was Also, land sale and disposition involved, where the city was a part of the property disposition. The middle one, we're probably familiar with the middle one. It's the Exchange building. It's right in the heart of downtown. It is luxury development. It was never said to be anything other than luxury development. It is a mixed use development, though. So 400 Rose is also mixed use. There's commercial and residential. So the Exchange unit brought some downtown economic growth and vitality, and it also brought with it 131 units originally, but they just upped it and decided they needed more units versus commercial, and so now it's a 152 residential unit building. And even though it's luxury, that is a good thing in my book, that there are units being built. So according to our market analysis, we do need units in all areas and all incomes. Why it's important to me is because I'm going to talk a lot about migration through this whole thing. And one of the things that happens when development stops is migration that typically happens in home ownership can't happen. So what happens when something like Exchange is built? Those who can afford to move into it move out of their existing dwelling and into the next level dwelling. And so this is just how, when incomes go up, there's a migration that happens. Okay, now I can afford to go here, so I'm going to go here. That opens up this next layer down to be open. So now those who are below that layer can move up. And those below that, it begins to have a trickle-down effect so that it creates movement or migration, internal movement and migration, so that those within an area, those within the city of Kalamazoo, have options to move. If people just stay put, there's no opportunity for migration within the city, and naturally occurring affordable units do not become available. So something like the Exchange is important in the whole housing ecosystem. Okay, the next one is Harrison Circle. Harrison Circle is one where a deep dive in affordability was able to take place. And that is because Harrison Circle is a low-income housing tax credit project. So a large chunk of the dollars that it took to build Harrison Circle came from outside tax credits. So there was an influx of money from outside that came into the city. That's a win. But the greatest win in a low-income housing tax credit is this is 80 units, of which 16 of them are for extremely low income, 26 are for very low income, and this was supported through local and state efforts. The tools that the city used is this developer was very interested in being part of a newly identified commercial node. So they actually did also a mixed unit development, so there's commercial and residential. And a payment in lieu of taxes was used, a pilot. There was recommendation for Eagle to support with funding, and also property disposition. The city took a lead in the disposition and the reduced land sale for low income and extremely low income households. Okay, the next three to talk about. The next three are more recent. So now we're in the last 5 years. Actually, most of them are within the last 2 to 3 years, but one is the last 5 years. Given COVID, nothing happened. So really 4. But we have the Creamery here at the end. The Creamery is also a low-income housing tax credit project. 48 units in the Creamery. 29 of those units are for very low-income households, and the tools that were used to make the Creamery happen through CPED are payment in lieu of taxes, brownfield was involved, also a brownfield TIF, and tax credits were used to create the very deep dive in affordability. In the middle, we have 913 South Westnedge. 913 South Westnedge was one that you and I approved together. So now we're getting into my time frame here. So 913 South Westnedge is a 4-unit. It's a nonprofit organization. 1 is reserved for extremely low income, and 3 are reserved for very low income. However, currently 3 are being utilized for extremely low, and 1 is being used for low income. So this was units created really for emancipated youth, and so they are being assisted with other dollars outside of us, but we supported this with the tool of funding. That's what they needed, funding, and that's what we helped with. Then you're all familiar with the lodge house. The lodge house is 60 units. All 60 of those units are under 60% AMI. I wasn't actually able to get the total AMI, but this is a project where no greater than 30% of the income of the individual is being utilized to ascribe or place rent. And so to make this happen, the tools that CPED used were a payment in lieu of taxes, home funds were utilized, as well as FFE dollars. There was supports from one of the partners that we partner with pre-development, LISC. Foundations got involved, and there was a lot of wraparound that happened to make that worked to make this project happen. Okay, other housing that is in the works. 530 South Rose. Might have seen it if you drive up and down South Rose. It's in construction now. 64 units. It's for senior housing. 25% are for extremely low. 13, not percent, I misspeak. 25 units, not percent, 25 units. 13 are for very low. 13 are for low. The development tools that were needed were pre-development dollars in partnership with LISC, EAGLE recommendation for funding, a payment in lieu of taxes, brownfield was involved, and this is a low-income housing tax credit project. So once again, those outside resources came in to make this happen in our city and also allow the developer to do a deep dive with affordability. We have 315 East Frank that someone mentioned this morning in the comments. 12 residential units, 1 commercial unit. 2 are reserved for very low income, 1 is reserved for low income. This development took a lot of supports through planning, also pre-development with our partner LISC. Technical assistance was offered through LISC, a recommendation to EAGLE, brownfield was involved, planning was involved, there was zoning involved, our public services was involved, and we also supported with direct funding on this project. 715 Verdict is a 5-unit where only 1 is affordable, but this one is interesting because it's a private owner who has owned this building and is starting to see some movement in their market and start to believe in the market and is actually starting to put their own money into redeveloping. And so that's really exciting from my perspective in community development, because it starts to show that there's a turnaround and a faith in the markets where private money starts to go into development and make things happen. So we had talked just a couple slides ago about migration, and this is another way. When we had a consultant, Ryan Kilpatrick, this is another way that he talked with a strategy as far as getting the individual owners who live here to start to invest in their properties is going to be a way to create some naturally affordable units so that they can sort of take the lead in creating some market rent opportunities to get migration happening so that people come up and out of their affordable units so that they're made available. And then East Side Square. East Side Square was with Kalamazoo County Land Bank. It's 6 units, and 3 are reserved for very low income. I'm going to breathe for a second. Okay. Now with the strategy, that's new development. This is a very busy slide, and I'm going to be very kind of quick on this. I don't have a lot of numbers, but I do want to just let everyone know. With our entitlement dollars, we do a lot of work with preservation and neighborhood markets. So we work with Kalamazoo Neighborhood Housing Services on the Kalamazoo Attainable Housing Project. That's new development. There's been over 20 properties built through KNHS. This is a partnership, and the tools that are used is, once again, we partner with LISC with pre-development, technical assistance. We partner with Home Builders Association. We partner with the local foundations, NeighborWorks America, Brownfield Scattered Site TIF, and also property disposition and reduced land sales. All of the new construction is reserved for low-income households. We partnered and approved last year for the 3 tiny homes. That will be coming back because there was a property transfer on that. So that will be coming back with a request for the new owner to be able to do those 3 tiny homes. In the past, we have partnered with Home Funds, 2 units for Open Doors, for very low and low income. New Horizon 4 units, which is Section 8 low. I think they're Section 8. I think they're low income. Village Sage, 2 home units. They are Section 8 for sure. We partnered with 3 home funded units on NACD and their senior housing. We've supported Community Homeworks with critical repair, code repair. Also KNHS and Community Homeworks do education. Community Homeworks for the homeowner, and KNHS for counseling for sort of pre-purchase. We partner with HRI on tenant-based rental assistance, ISK on their homeless to home ownership program. That's with home ARP dollars and also a tenant-based rental assistance, and supported United Way with their continuum of care, and Fair Housing with doing sessions and presentations as it relates to fair housing. Okay, so approved and imagined. So I dropped on the bottom of this, you'll see the little dots on the bottom. This is just a reminder, and for those who maybe weren't with us for that last training where we talked about the development timeline. So developments come to us oftentimes in a concept phase, meaning it's an idea. It's an idea, I think this is a great idea, I think it could work. But then that concept phase has to start to grow legs and move around and move through the chain here of the arrow to actually become a project. So the dots on this are just concept and site assembly. The feasibility analysis, that's where the developer themselves is saying, does this even make sense? Can I make this work? Can I make this work for extremely low? Can I make this work for very low? Can I make this work for low? Does this have to be workforce? Is this a market rate project? That's where the developer themselves goes through their financial analysis. And then they begin to assemble their financial stack. I will call it, going forward, if I do reference it, a capital stack. And they're building their money to be able to do this project. So this is where the city comes in as it relates to those economic resources. The incentives often can happen in the concept phase to see, yeah, if you move forward with this, these incentives are available. But when it comes to funding, that usually happens when there is proof of movement on that capital stack. So the approved and pending here are, not all of these have been to commission for a recommendation of funding, so I'd like to keep the projects themselves as confidential as this is until they come forward to commission for recommendation. But I do want to tell you the unit count of the those that have approved site plans and are moving forward. It's 155 units. 39 of those units are for extremely low income. 95 of those units are for very low income. 40 of those units, 21 of those units are for low income units. In that stack, there is low-income tax credits, there's recommendation for pilots, there's brownfields, there's TIF, there's planning, time, and efforts that have gone into it. These are very thoughtful projects that are just working on completing their capital stack to begin construction. We've also been working with the Home Builders Association on creating multi-unit opportunities that would bring to bear some sort of appraisal gap subsidy and partner with the pre-approved plans. Okay, if you lost count or if you were trying to count, I should have told you. I have accumulated all of this for you with this slide. So 741 units on those looking back properties. 123 of those units were for extremely low income. 101 of those units were for very low income, and 68 are for low income units. So part of the strategy is to incorporate affordability options in all projects. Take a project like the Exchange. No affordability got in that. It doesn't mean that it's a bad project for the city of Kalamazoo. It just didn't necessarily meet the measures for economic resources and incentives that equate into dollars to go into it. There are other projects, though, where to create affordability options, they are viable or feasible when they're working on their capital stack. And the 741 units and the breakout of how many are for extremely low and low, very low and low, gives you cause that this is happening. The attention to affordability within projects is happening. Now, the pre-development for 2024. The pre-development for 2024, these are those who were in that concept phase and started talking with the city and were talking about the incentives and potential funding recommendations. Of those projects for 2024, it's a total of 191 units. 51 of those units are for extremely low income. 58 are for low income, for very low income, and 64 are for low income. So let's see, 3, 12, so 123, did I do my math quick? 9, 13, 1, 173. So 173 of those units are for low income, very low, and extremely low households. So there has been great effort in creating opportunities for affordability to come into our developments. Partnership and collaboration. We do not do this alone. There are, I had one of my relatives say, I think your job is just to go to meetings. And there are some weeks I feel that way, because there are a lot of conversations. That's the way I look at them. There are a lot of conversations that are happening around housing. Collaboration has to happen, and there are collaborative efforts happening, and I did want to identify some of those efforts because I feel sometimes you guys hear of it when it comes for some recommendation, but things that are queuing up tend to just happen not with a megaphone. So one of the partnerships and collaboration is LISC and the Kalamazoo County Land Bank and the City of Kalamazoo. We've been working, and there's other partners involved in this too. We've been working on a strategy that would take a blighted, mostly vacant portfolio that the land bank has access to and convert it into upwards to 90 units over the next 5 years. These are existing structures that need assistance, and the strategy would be to get these back into the hands of owners and or a combination of owners and renters. And what I mean by that is some of these units can be repurposed. Some of these units are so that one unit can actually become 2 units, or could actually become 3 units with a potential of rental income or a potential of more than one household, creating natural affordability through the reduction of square footage. And so we are looking at these opportunities, and currently there's 50 of these units, and we're looking to expand it out to where we can get upward to 90 of units from those 50. That's a long strategy. It's a 5-year strategy, but it's one currently being worked on right now. There are a lot of very thoughtful people at that table, and I'm excited to see what it yields. We also, over the last year and a half, have been working with churches. Churches in our area, we have a lot of churches that own land, parking lots in particular. And so there's been 5 different churches that we've worked on. And once again, you guys have seen these pre-development dollars come forward for recommendation for LISC. And so I'm mentioning them a lot because some of our pre-development and technical assistance actually comes through collaborations and partners. So there's been technical assistance, there's been different boot camps offered for the churches who are churches, but they have land, they want to be a part of the housing solution, and what can they do? So trying to match them with developers and also talk about what their goals are with the land and what they'd like to see come from housing. So there's been about 5 churches that we have worked with and sat and had conversations with, and one of those, there'll probably be a recommendation coming on one of those. So we work on that front. As I mentioned before, we're also working with the Home Builders Association. So we're trying to once again re-engage the Homeowners Association to come up with strategies to create opportunities that once again reduce cost. So if the builder themselves is willing to buy into the vision of affordable housing, they'll reduce their costs that they would charge, and everyone throws in a portion to make these happen. And then lastly, along with that, I have been working with the county and the housing director at the county, and we're talking about strategies on how can we potentially leverage our funding and maximize impact through a concentric or a concentrated effort. So really having the conversations with the key players in how do we build opportunities for affordable. You'll see tonight there's also a $50,000 grant acceptance. That's a HUD Housing Readiness Initiative grant, and that's to do analysis for some of the pre-development properties, particularly the multi-unit, and to do the analysis of the impact both for affordability and the impact on market that these would have. So you'll see that forthcoming. Sneak peek. Okay. This next slide, I don't really want to talk about all of these, just go through all of these numbers because this is from our Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report. These are numbers that coincide with our entitlement dollars. The reason why I pause here is because normally when I'm asked to do presentations like this, you're kind of asking for what happened in the last year, what's annually, or can you tell me what happened in the last 12 months? These numbers are wonky because HUD's program year runs from July to June. So if you ask me when these happen, it's not within the last 12 months. So July to June, but I did want to bring them up as part of the strategy because I was asked to present sort of everything that we're doing, where we've been, and where we're going. So with our entitlement dollars, we support housing with our entitlement dollars. We do lead remediation, we do homeowner repairs, down payment assistance, rental rehabilitation, new construction. In homelessness assistance, there were 208 families that were assisted. Economic development, there were 9 small business grants that were given out to assist small businesses. We do neighborhood improvements. There was a fitness pad that happened in the Edison Neighborhood Association. So with the entitlement dollars, it's really focused on those neighborhoods that, according to HUD, are the low-income neighborhoods, and that's really where 51% of the population is low income. So the entitlement dollars, once again, federal dollars. Remember when I mentioned we really like to do the deep dive with federal and state monies, because that's where the big dollars tend to come from. If there are any questions on this slide after or whenever, please let me know. So, from that consolidated report, let's look at the numbers from that, and you'll see what I'm saying as far as using the federal dollars to do the deep dives. 325 households served with federal dollars were extremely low income. 140 households, very low income. 99 households, low income. A total of 564 households with our entitlement dollars were impacted. And there are no other data points. The HUD dollars don't go to any incomes above and beyond those. There also in your package is a breakdown of the demographics that coincide with that 564 households. So once again, toolbox labeled goal, increasing housing across all income levels and neighborhoods. So really what we do is we stop and we think about what are we hearing, what are people bringing to us, what's needed, what's not there, are there barriers, do they need to be addressed, are we missing the mark, are we doing too much or not enough, and are there tools in our toolbox that we can use to assist this happening. And so we work with those who build the developments, and they come with their ideas, and then we come with, here's what we can offer to assist in making it happen. We all have a different puzzle piece, and then we bring them all together to begin to create the landscape that we all desire for our great city of Kalamazoo here. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very, very much, Ms. Parsons. I appreciate all your work, the work of your team, and I know you've presented on some of these things to us before, but I think it's important that we go over it. This is a lot of detail. In terms of other people getting a chance, people have been taking pictures of the screens here. Will there be, people have an opportunity to see this deck that you have someplace else through our website if they want to look at this? Would that be possible?
Sure.
Okay, so that would be posted. How would we link that if that goes onto our website?
It probably will be under community development, but my hesitation was not that it can't be, it can be. But I would have to rely on somebody else to tell me where that is at. So
we can find that out, but
yeah.
I appreciate that. All right.
That I don't know.
So questions, commissioners? Vice Mayor Hess?
Thank you, Sherilyn. That was very comprehensive. Do we have any data for the migration caused by the Exchange Building? Do we know what happened there in terms of the trickle-down
No,
effect?
we don't. And I specifically asked on this new target market analysis if there was a way to get that. And they indicated that they would have to start tracking that specifically, but there is no data source to get that from. So I don't have it, and I don't have it in the new target market analysis. It is just common housing sort of theory.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Attended an event the other day at the Creamery where they put in Matt Hollander put in a ride share program, the car cares, or I forget what it's called, but an electric car that belongs to the Creamery where people can rent it out for $5 an hour or $50 a day. And they know that housing and transportation and income are all linked, and daycare are all linked and connected, which is why the Creamery is so wonderful. I know that that was an act of great faith by so many people to work on that creamery project. How long did that actually take to put the project together?
So I can't answer how long it took because I was not here to
A little over 5 years.
And it's being very effective at helping families make it with both daycare and housing these days. So that was an amazing thing. And Matt Hollander, I just want to give him a shout out for really working on low-income housing too throughout the city. Just one of the things, you mentioned the faith communities and being involved in housing. I'm just wondering, I was going to ask you about that anyway, because I know that obviously the Mount Zion project is moving forward, and there are other things, but like, how could we reach out to all faith communities in Kalamazoo and have them work together? If you're not a Mount Zion, or if you're not a huge community, how is it possible that we could work with those folks and help them work together?
Yeah, so there have been conversations on that, and the conversations have been around creating some form of technical assistance that would bring the groups together and then offer some sort of incentive, so sort of like a housing boot camp, and then bring developers to the table as well. You know, most churches, they're churches. They're not developers. They are churches. So they do need to partner, and it's important that the connections are one that they can trust, just because this isn't their business. And so there have been discussions about that technical assistance and putting together some sort of boot camp opportunity for the churches. So
great. I look forward to that moving forward too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Hess. Other questions for Sharon Parsons? Or thoughts? Okay. Commissioner Pradle.
Cool. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about how you and your team are trying to synchronize efforts with the county and the Housing for All millage and their housing plan with our consolidated plan. How do we try to make sure that those efforts align and we're working with each other to double down on efforts?
So one of the most practical ways that we worked on alignment was we had actually asked HUD for an extension on our consolidated plan. So we were supposed to be entering into a new consolidated plan, and we asked for a year extension so that we would be better aligned with Imagine Kalamazoo and with our new target market analysis. We were granted that. We had to sort of lay out the case for it, and HUD agreed to it. So that's just a practical sort of behind the scenes way we're aligning. The other way we're aligning is there are conversations that happen on a monthly, sometimes bi-weekly time. We are working to streamline our applications and also working to streamline our the affordability data. There's a lot of compliance that goes into our long-term affordability, and that can be a very heavy lift for a small crew. And so we're working with the county to figure out, like, okay, what streamline efforts, what programs and protocols can we put in, mutual programs and protocols can we put in place? So the county, obviously, they're countywide, but the city of Kalamazoo is such that a lot of the affordable projects really just gravitate to the city of Kalamazoo. So there is already a natural inclination for the two of us to work together. And so that is coming on board. Also, those partners that we partner with, they're being brought to the table as well. Like, it's not my partner. So I'll speak about LISC because we do a lot with them as pre-development and technical assistance. And so they're brought to the table, not as my partner, not as their partner, but a partner in the whole housing ecosystem. So having those conversations and beginning to see where our efforts can align and how can our individual pieces really maximize the efforts that we're looking for.
Sure. Thank you. Another question, this is just something I think about a lot, just kind of my day job. But one of the things that concerns me is when you look at, how much mortgage prices have gone up, the fact that number of homes that are on the market are driving up, the fact that home prices have just ballooned so high, that when you look at the income disparity, or especially on racial lines of homeownership, and that gap widening, it concerns me, that in this climate that there was already a giant hurdle in place that prevented people from becoming first-time homebuyers. Now there's a mountain, and so just was curious to get your thoughts about what we can do, or if you could share a little bit more about what we are doing to support first-time homebuyers with things like down payment assistance and other strategies and resources to get people in a home for the first time. It's a huge economic engine for a family in creating intergenerational wealth, and yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, so a couple things. So one really interesting on the draft target market analysis, there are still naturally affordable homes for sale. The issue is we don't see them because they get snapped up so quickly. But the data from the Southwest Michigan real estate and from the sales shows that there are still those units, those houses that are available. They're either getting snapped up by investors or they're getting snapped up before they hit the market. So one of the strategies is how do we get a rental portfolio that we can unroll and put on the market, so that one, we build a supply. We build a supply so that the demand doesn't continue to drive up these prices to where only those who can afford are able to play. And so that's part of the strategy that I talked about with the land bank. It's key in saying, okay, we're gonna actually work on some of these vacant blighted structures that traditionally might get scooped up by someone who's just going to buy them and do the bare minimum and then rent them for more than what they should be rented for. And so that's part of the strategy. It's part of the strategy to create affordability. It's part of the strategy to create opportunity, but it's also a strategy to undergird the markets themselves, because you don't want it to where there's only these high income homes that are actually cranking out in the markets, because then we do those markets a disfavor by sort of arbitrarily inflating those markets. And therefore we run into yet another, compound problem. So by being very mindful of how we balance the markets out with our efforts is the way that we don't change the whole scope or landscape of a neighborhood by doing one strategy and neglecting another on either side, by doing one strategy and neglecting our other, or by doing one strategy and neglecting another. So it is a very sort of tenuous work and a balance that goes into it. Mm-hmm. And which is why it's important that there are a lot of voices.
Mm-hmm. There was one home on the street I live on that's a couple doors down, and it was, kind of a little bit of a rundown house, and somebody purchased it for $115,000 and did not put a ton in. I think they invested about $40,000 and ended up selling the home for $330,000. Yeah. And I mean, there are not homes that are worth $330,000 on our street. And so, it just goes to show like how difficult that was. And there was a pretty significant bidding war for that one house. And so you just imagine how scary that would be for a first-time family who's trying to purchase a home for the first time, and, needing time to make decisions, time to work with all the different barriers and paperwork that require you to do that work. And I'm hopeful we can do as much as possible to help keep that momentum going.
Yeah, so supply and demand is something that we have to think about when it comes to housing. I mean, it is the home. It's where people reside, where they live. That's the heart of it. But as an investment opportunity, supply and demand is just a fundamental piece of investment. And so if we aren't mindful of that, that's going to happen all day long. And it is, which is why it seems there's no affordable units, because they just get snapped.
Yeah. And then just one final question, just more of a fun question to ask you, but in terms of everything you're working on, you laid out just a ton of projects you're working on. This doesn't even encompass everything that I'm sure you're working on, which I know is the case. But is there a project or something that you've been working on or completed that you particularly are proud of or really enjoyed working on that is unique or stand out or you feel like is special to Kalamazoo?
So I think all the projects are special, which I was like, that's why I smiled when you asked me, because, you know, they're all very complex and they all come with their own unique set of challenges. And I love puzzles. You know, I do Sudoku before I go to bed and then dream of numbers and how to put them in the right place. So I find trying to put the puzzle pieces together somewhat interesting and fascinating, and then, you know, thinking that we were going to be building this, and as we put the pieces together, it starts to take shape and find, oh, we're actually building something that looks quite different than what we are, but it's still really, really cool. So I do enjoy all of them, but truly. I don't know that there's one over the other I can pick off the top of my head.
I'll give you a pass on that one. Sure.
Thank you, because they're all pretty cool.
Sounds good. Yeah, sounds good. All right, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Pradel. Other? Yes, Commissioner Hoffman.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for this, Sherilyn. I appreciate everything that you do. I had a question in reference to the redevelopment ready community. What are we doing to work with emerging developers that don't have the capital or the experience as much as our formal and the ones that are the big names? What are we doing to help those emerging developers come online?
Yeah, so we've a few things actually. So the city and LISC have really been working on that front specifically, and LISC is a key player in that one because they are a CDFI. They have lending capabilities. They're local. They have a local presence, but they're actually a national organization. So, you know, the opportunities there run deep. And then we've also had conversations with the Kalamazoo Foundation about coming back on board in this area. And they're very interested in creating opportunities for the emerging developer. So as you alluded to, the emerging developer oftentimes doesn't have the balance sheet that seasoned developers might have. And so that can be a challenge in securing the resources that they need to put into the project, because any project, the developer has to have money of their own in the project. And so that can be a challenge. And so there are opportunities in the works for the emerging developers, and there's also connections to be had already. More formal opportunities are in the works, and opportunities are already available. It's just a matter of making the connections with those partners who are seeing this need and stepping up.
Have you seen some of our seasoned developers kind of mentor some of those emerging developers to help them get not only experience but exposure?
Yeah, so Vice Mayor Hess mentioned Matt Hollander, and the Hollander Group has done mentoring. They've done mentoring with faith-based communities, a couple of them. They did mentoring with Jamari Bogan and Bogan Development. They actually worked through some training too on low-income housing tax credits with him. And then I have seen a couple other developers who have talked about partnering with another developer to do some of the mentoring and training. And then the Home Builders Association has also been willing to do some mentoring and training. So one of the builders that came up through the Home Builders Association actually launched out and is now doing business on his own as a builder, and is now being considered an emerging builder because now it's his own business versus working with the capital that he had access to before.
Okay, thank you for that. My next question is around policy. And I know when we talk about individuals coming into our community and purchasing property and those dollars leaving our community because they're out of state, has there been any conversation in your department around can we create a policy that we may be able to hold these out-of-state owners more accountable financially when they are not taking care of the property and they are dilapidated? Has there been any discussion about policy and what we can do around out-of-state owners?
Yeah, so honestly, not that much in my division. There has been some conversations about that that I've heard rumblings of with our code division, but I can't speak to it because honestly, in my little team, no. Or maybe not yet is a better answer.
Okay, I'll take that. I'll take not yet. And then finally, when I look at imagining Kalamazoo and the 741 units of extremely, very, and low, I often get concerned because that number looks large, but we still have issues with people being able to access that housing based on criminal background, based on income, source of income use. And so when I see these numbers, very impressive, and yet we still have people who cannot get access to those units. So is there anything that is being worked on with property management companies, like doing some kind of educational component and not relying on, I know when we're looking at LIHTC, there are very few property management companies that do that kind of management, right? Is there something that we can create here where we can bake in equity and anti-racism into how people are able to access some of those units?
Yeah, so if you're receiving assistance from the city, you do have to, you do get a copy of our ordinances, which that would be a violation of what's allowed in the city, and you do have to sign off that you have received it, that you've read it, and you understand it. So that is one strategy that we do currently to make sure that everyone is aware. As far as the education component, interesting, really interesting. We don't do it currently, but it's really interesting to think about.
We don't do it yet.
Yeah, not yet. Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Cooney?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, that was an excellent presentation, and I'm humbled by how much you know and how much you got a grip on this. Here's my thoughts. First of all, the contrast between what this nation says and the way we actually live. Martin Luther King said one time, all we ask you, America, is that we live up to what you said on paper. What we said on paper is that housing is a human right. We were the authors, and we signed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And Article 20 says housing is a human right. President Roosevelt, after the Second World War, said we need an economic bill of rights, and housing is a human right. But that's not how housing works. Housing works by the market. And it wasn't always as much as this as it is now. And I don't think we should just be quiet about this. I think we should scream, because there was a time from the 1930s up until about 1980 when this country did try to build homes for people. And we've stopped doing that. We just stopped doing that. So that's my one thought. My second thought is this. All the things you're doing are wonderful, but they're all long-term. You're saying that, hey, from the time the project is conceived until we start to build it, it's 3 years. And we got so many people out there now that are hurt. We just heard last week, 200 kids in the Kalamazoo public schools that are homeless. I think we should be doing more for the people right now that are not in decent places to live. I think we should be looking at that. And then my third thing is this. I don't know. I mean, I'm humbled by how much you know and how many people in this city, people sitting right up here, who have done so much about homeless. I just wonder if there is room for us to do a more collective response to this whole thing.
Thank you, Commissioner Cooney. Yeah, Commissioner Wilson.
Thank you so much for this presentation. It is nice to see that we're at least, moving towards the right direction in terms of housing availability for all spectrums, all members of our society. I did have a question, and I know it's still early. The market analysis for the city is in draft form still, but from what you are seeing so far, are there any early indicators, as how we're trending as far as what we are hoping to have available here in the short and long term versus what we need?
Yeah, so I'll answer it this way. There hasn't been any surprises. There hasn't really been any surprises yet that I've gotten to. It is better than the last one that we had. So that, as Commissioner Cooney said, like we're going in the right direction, and so I'm hopeful on that front. Yeah.
Yeah, Vice Mayor Hess.
Sherilyn, it was mentioned when we were discussing the Arcadia Festival site in Phase 3 that was going to be some housing. All right, it's possible that could be housing along Kalamazoo Avenue. Do you know anything about that, or is that a different department?
So thank you. You probably saw my face. I have not been brought into those conversations. So if you're going to ask me something specific about it, I probably am too ignorant to answer.
Well, we all are. And so we don't know yet, but it's an idea. I think what you said, it's an idea at first, and then it does take years for it to come to fruition.
Yeah, so if it's in concept phase yet, it hasn't reached a priority of conversation with me yet.
Okay.
So
Oh, good. So hopefully it becomes housing. Thank you.
Yes.
Other questions and comments? All right, well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate the work you do every day and coming here to talk to us about it. And I know this obviously will be an ongoing discussion, and we see things on our agenda as well as we go forward. I would just like to remark on a couple things, is that it isn't a surprise nationally for where we are at in terms of lack of affordable housing. And it's entirely accurate, is that from the national perspective, the federal government got out of the business of creating deeply affordable housing. And that basically happened in the 80s. And that was when all new money for public housing ended, all new money for what was privately developed, but still deeply affordable housing ended, 221D3 program-related sort of work, and we really capped the Section 8 vouchers, which is another way to provide affordable housing without building new housing. So the thing that ties those three programs together is that in all those instances, the rent on any given unit is based on tenant income. So it's subsidized. That's what creates real affordability. And it's true that the program that is now in existence, that's been around really now for over 3 decades, that replaced all those programs, is low-income housing tax credits, which is the national program. But that program is not a tenant subsidy-based program. That's a program that creates housing units that have a rent associated with them, not based on tenant income, but based more broadly on an affordability standard tied to AMI in a given area. Once again, that's a federal program. And I don't want to say anything negatively about that program, but when you think about it, on any given, as you went through, and there were multiple developments where you listed low-income housing tax credits as a critical component in those developments, and I would say they are the vast majority of what funds those programs is low-income housing tax credits. Any given one of those projects, easily, whether they're talking about the creamery, we're talking about the Harrison Circle one, or the new ones that Mount Zion are going to do, literally have 10, 15, and more $1 million worth of tax credits in them. So any one of those entities, it would not even be possible with our budget to even fund one of them. We are entirely dependent on leveraging those outside resources to do the work that we do. So you're right. That's a big, big challenge, and it's being very involved in the affordable housing creation business, as I have for a long time. I'm very discouraged to note that I don't think this is going to be something that's going to be discussed at all in this current election. I haven't heard anybody bring it up, and at least from the campaign perspective, and it just seems to get lost in the mix. I mean, we're talking about many, many other things, which are actually, in many cases, not even substantive things related to how we all live here together. So I think you're right. The conversation really has to be more pointed about that. And in the meantime, I do really, really appreciate the efforts of the team across helping first-time home buyers. There's a lot of assistance that goes into those that specifically mentioned, but a lot of Foundation for Excellence subsidy dollars that have gone in to help folks acquire homes, all the way, to providing housing for people who are literally unsheltered. So all the way across the spectrum. So thanks for keeping all that going. And I'm glad we spend some moments here at least talking just specifically about this. So thank you again. Manager Rispa.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sherilyn, and appreciate it. And that concludes our work session.
Thank you, Manager Rispa. Here's an opportunity for commissioner comments. Does anybody want to make a comment for committee of the whole meeting? All right. Just a reminder that there will be an opportunity for commissioner comments at the end of our business meeting that starts at 7 o'clock. Got a regular agenda that we're getting to here. And there's also an opportunity for public comments near the beginning of that meeting, 3 minutes rather than 2, and there will be some specific regular agenda items which you can comment on also. So appreciate everyone who attended this meeting, appreciate that, and hope to see you at our next meeting at 7. We are adjourned.